As the 9th National Assembly winds down, the scorecard of both the Senate and the House of Representatives in the last 4 years readily comes to mind. Tonight on Arise News, we'll interrogate the 9th Assembly in the light of the legislative agenda set for itself and the extent to which this was achieved to help provide good governance to the Nigerian people. What are the milestones achieved and the obstacles that the Parliament failed to overcome?
All right, we're expecting to have reports that will give us, just lay a background for us to have this discussion. Otherwise, we might as well go straight into our chat this evening. With us tonight to review the activities of the 9th Assembly is the Senator Ajibola Bisiru, who is the outgoing Senate spokesperson. Thank you so much for joining us. I mean, there's no better
Welcome
person
to News
really.
Night.
Yes. Now, let's start. Let's even hear it from the horse's mouth, like we always say. Your own assessment as a spokesman of the 9th Assembly, what would you say, or how would you score the performance of the 9th Assembly?
Yeah, thank you for having me here. And of course, in scoring the 9th National Assembly, there should be a parameter for objective assessment of what to base the assessment upon. And there cannot be any better basis for that than to first interrogate what are the functions and what are the constitutional responsibility and mandate of the National Assembly. Basically, the National Assembly has three mandates. One, to make law for the good government and the development of our country. As part of that law-making function is also the constitutional making power by Section 9 of the Constitution. As a law-making power, we also have the power to oversight the executive arms and everybody spending from the national treasury with a view to reveal inefficiency and to stamp out corruption. Of course, the third function is also confirmatory powers of a certain key appointment under the Constitution, under relevant law. So if we are going to do any assessment of the performance of the National Assembly, it should be on the basis of those three indices. Right. And then talking about lawmaking responsibility, I think more than any other assembly in the history of Nigeria, in terms of constitutional amendment, we have had far-reaching constitutional amendment that has impacted on restructuring the country. You will recall that certain items that have been on exclusive legislative list, like power generation, transmission within the national grid, are now being made a concurrent matter. The same thing with also correctional services, by which the state also have concurrent ability with the national legislative arm. And of course, you also see a law relating to strengthening judicial sector. More recently, the one assented to by President Bola Tinubu this evening, harmonizing the retirement age and pension right of judicial officers. And of course, aside constitutional amendment, we have also made sterling improvement on our law in certain key areas. The Electoral Act 2022, which introduced technology into our electoral system, the Petroleum Industry Act, which served as the heart of development of our economy, which had suffered a stillbirth for a period of a decade and a half. We were able to resolve that and liberalize that sector, and with a prospect of getting investment into that sector. Of course, the Company and Allied Matter Act, which is very crucial to driving our economy, was also a new CAMA was put in place in 2020, and of course, you also see the Presidential Enabling Business Council was able to come up with an omnibus legislation that has allowed Nigeria to take a higher hierarchy in terms of ease of doing business and liberalizing the investment climate in Nigeria. So in terms of making relevant laws that affect fundamentally the essence of advancement of our people, the National Assembly, 9th National Assembly has done very well in that regard. In terms of lawmaking power, it's also the power as we get to money bills.
I mean, we could give you all night to reel out all these good things about the 9th Assembly. Definitely, you're not giving yourself 100%, are you?
Of course, even in the university, if you get 70%, you're an A student.
Okay,
so you're scoring yourself?
Even if you get 70%, you're an A student.
Okay,
so
now
are you scoring yourself 70%?
95%.
95. Imagine. Okay, that's all right. Right. Well, the 8th National Assembly, under the leadership of Senator Bukola Saraki, had a cold war of sorts with the executive. How did you, and you inherited that, the 9th Assembly inherited that. So how did you manage that transition without the impact of that fraught relationship with the executive?
I think right from when the 9th Assembly came into being, and I must say that we must understand the role of National Assembly. I've told you constitutional responsibility of National Assembly as to lawmaking, oversight, confirmation. National Assembly is not an opposition, parliament. And when you look at the 8th Assembly, it's unfortunate that even though the APC had majority in the National Assembly, for certain political considerations, some of the leading elements who use the APC platform to get to the National Assembly cross over to the PDP, either de facto or de jure, and consider themselves as opposition even to the government they're supposed to work with. But the agenda of the 9th National Assembly is that we want to have a National Assembly that works for Nigeria. Of course, there must be checks and balances, there must be separation of power, but ultimately, irrespective of whichever political party that we belong to, we must consider to what extent will our actions and our collaboration and our confrontation, as the case may be, will advance the interests of the people. Just as I've been able to say, the list is endless in terms of what the 9th National Assembly have been able to achieve. Right. On the contrary, the 8th Assembly only achieved a lot of media uplas, confrontation, and of course,
but let's even talk about this point that you raised, and you're saying, look, the 9th Assembly did not set out to be confrontational with the executive. But a lot of people, they're reading into this, cushy relationship between the legislature and the executive. They're saying, look, it was romance taken too far. A love affair that may not have really have, been in the interest of Nigerians at the end of the day. I mean, you reeled out some of the basic functions of the legislature, oversight function, making laws for good governance, and of course confirmation of those who have been nominated by the executive. Screening of ministerial nominees, for example, without portfolio. A lot of people frowned at that. That didn't really go down too well. And the more important one, the oversight function, allowing President Buhari have his way as far as loans upon loans are concerned. 77 trillion naira right now in terms of debt.
I think I'll first address the issue. There's a difference between law as it is and law as it ought to be. They call it lex lata and lex ferenda. Law as it is in Nigeria does not prescribe the ministerial nominees to be sent with their portfolios. There's nothing like that under the Nigerian law. So it's not like the US system. So the National Assembly and indeed the executive, they are not violating any law. But the
National Assembly had the opportunity to.
It's not about law. There's nothing that has impelled us to make that to be part of our law. What the constitutional requirement is that every state must have a nominee in the cabinet of Nigeria. That is the law as it is. And for you to amend the law, it's not only the National Assembly that will amend the law, it has to also have the concurrence of the two-thirds of the state of the federation. So as it were today, we have acted within the ambit of the law. Then on the question of the loan request, it has nothing to do with failure of oversight function. There is no loan request that have been approved by National Assembly that has not gone through the crucible of thorough examination by the National Assembly. There were two pending.
Well, the 9th Assembly was not able to say no to President Buhari.
I'll give you. I like talking to fact.
Right.
There were certain requests that were turned down by the National Assembly. One, there's a $800 million dollar request for palliative in lieu of the subsidy being removed. That has not been considered by the National Assembly. Also, there is also the request recently for a promissory note in respect of what they call accumulated debt settlement. That was also not considered. But it appears that there's a selective with respect amnesia as to what the National Assembly have done right and what they have not done right. I'm also aware that quite a number of nominees of the federal government were also turned down because they did not fulfill the constitutional requirement. One of them are 2 instances. Nominees for REC from Osun and the nominee for INEC National Commissioner were turned down because they were found not to have fulfilled constitutional requirement. Also, a nominee for Law Reform Commission was found not to be to have met the requirement of being somebody that had been called to the bar. That request was also turned down. So it appears that as far as the law is concerned, we have been able to do. But to the extent that some opposition element believe that the work of National Assembly can only be brought out in a broad perspective by being antagonistic and by unnecessarily insisting what is not within the parameter of the law, we must be sure that Nigerian Constitution, Section 1, Subsection 1, provide that Nigeria should be ruled in accordance with the provision of the Nigerian Constitution, not what is in anybody's head or what is in anybody's perspective as to how a government ought to be run. It is government as it is and in line with the constitutional mandate that we have been given and we swore to uphold.
Interesting. Thank you for your insight tonight. There are more functions of the lawmakers, apart from lawmaking and confirming
oversight functions
and all that. Yeah. Representative duties and deliberative duties. Let's talk about touching base, the feedback mechanism between you, the lawmakers, and the grassroots people, the people at the grassroots, the people that put you there, that sent you there. How would you assess your feedback mechanism and your relationship with the people at the grassroots? Because in Nigeria, that is missing. The moment you inaugurate the lawmakers, you can't reach them again.
I don't know which lawmaker you are talking about. I can speak for myself as a senator representing Osun Central Senatorial District as I speak. And I think until Tuesday this week, we have a constituent office and we have in each of those local government liaison officer that relate with us. Almost on a weekly basis, we get representation. And we have also supported our constituents in several respects in terms of facilitating projects into those constituencies. I would say that in my constituency, speaking for myself, I've been able to attract no less than 14 schools that have been completed. I've attracted no less than 1,100 solar lights in our market, our traditional squares, and so on and so forth.
So when it comes to one out of hundreds,
I can only talk. See, I'm a lawyer. I can only speak for what I know. I don't know those you are referring to that have not been able to liaise with their constituency, and you can only talk. And
there's also any mechanism within the the Senate to ensure that senators actually were in connection, with
touching base.
Of course, there is. There are so many. Even there are so many. It's good for Nigerians to have. There are so many areas. One, you must have a constituency office, and there's a process by which it will be vetted to ensure that you have constituency office. Therefore, every of the projects that you do, there's also oversight by the anti-corruption agencies. I know very well that all projects that have been able to facilitate in the Nigerian budget, when they are being implemented, they were also oversighted by the ICPC, who send representative to that. There are also civil society organization, budgets and all those of them that also ensure that they go around and be able to verify whether those insertions in the budget were actually implemented. So there are levels of law, regulatory and non-state actor who also work in that regard.
Very quickly, in 30 seconds, in the 9th Assembly, even the 8th, there were challenges with the issue of the executive interference in who emerged the leadership level of the National Assembly. The same thing is happening now. What pitfalls would you want to advise the 10th Assembly not to fall into?
I wouldn't say it's executive interference. I'm a party man, and I believe that any political party who is in government is also interested in which and who among his members take a leadership position. If there will be synergy in the working relationship between the executive and legislative arm, there must be some form of consensus, understanding as to one, which part of the country will take that position, the caliber of people that will take that position, and of course their pedigree. That's what to do with influence. And of course, you can see that Mr. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is having interface with the members and the senators elect. The parties are also having interface with that. It has nothing to do with meddling. It has to do with interference.
Even when it's causing some kind of crisis within the party already?
The political party is about crisis, and political process is about crisis and aggregation and settlement of crisis.
It's a good place to live it. Senator Bisiru Ajibola, spokesman of the outgoing Nigerian Senate.
Thank you very much for your insight.